The hedgerows of Normandy were quiet for a moment. Only the distant hum of engines broke the stillness. In a narrow lane outside Villers, bocage, the early summer air smelled of oil, earth, and smoke. British Shermans crawled forward, their tracks clinking against loose stones. Inside, crews murmured, tense, sweating, watching the tree lines where German tanks had vanished hours before. For weeks, the Germans had mocked these machines, calling them Tommy cookers, laughing at their thin armor and weak 7.5mm guns. The Tiger crews, confident behind their thick steel, believed no Sherman could challenge them head-on. Then, from the shade of an orchard, a single muzzle flash tore through the mist. The 17-pounder shell screamed across 800 yards and punched through the side of a Panzer. Flames erupted, laughter turned to shock. The Germans had just met the Firefly, a tank that would rewrite their assumptions about Allied armor in Normandy. And this transformation had begun long before that single shot was fired. By the summer of 1944, the Second World War had entered its final, brutal phase. The Allies had crossed the Channel at last. The beaches of Normandy were behind them, but the real battle for France was only beginning. What waited beyond the dunes were not just villages and hedgerows, but the full weight of German armored power. For the Western Allies, the M4 Sherman was the backbone of every armored column. More than 50,000 had rolled off American assembly lines, shipped across oceans, and landed in Europe. It was fast to build, easy to repair, and mechanically reliable, the ideal tank for a global war of logistics. Yet reliability had come at a cost. The Sherman's 75 average gun, designed for 1942 battlefields, was outclassed by 1944. Its shells could penetrate Panzer IVs at close range, but against the new Panther and Tiger, they ricocheted like stones off concrete. Reports from Italy and the Eastern Front made Allied planners uneasy. German tanks with high-velocity 75mm and 880mm guns could destroy Shermans from 1,000 meters or more. In North Africa, American crews had learned to flank rather than duel. In Italy, British formations fought from ambush rather than charge. Still, the pattern was clear. Every encounter with heavy German armor demanded sacrifice before success. When Operation Overlord was planned, Allied leaders accepted the Sherman's limitations. They counted instead on numbers, air superiority, and artillery coordination to overwhelm the Wehrmacht. The doctrine was practical. Destroy the enemy not by matching his tanks one for one, but by combining all arms into a single crushing system. But for the men inside those Shermans, doctrine meant little when a Tiger's first shot could turn a friendly tank into a burning coffin. Crews developed a bitter humor about it. They called their tank the Ronson, after the light of that, light's first time, every time. British soldiers joked grimly that climbing into one was like stepping into a petrol tin, yet they kept fighting in them, trusting that skill and teamwork might offset thin armor. Meanwhile, British ordnance officers and engineers had been watching with growing concern. The United States had invested in upgrading the Sherman's gun to a longer 76mm, but the British had a weapon already capable of piercing German armor, the 17-pounder anti-tank gun, a formidable piece with a muzzle velocity exceeding 900 feet per second. The question was whether such a large weapon could ever fit inside the compact turret of a Sherman. The challenge was more than mechanical. By early 1944, production schedules were rigid, landing craft space was finite, and D-Day deadlines were fixed. There was no time to design a new tank from scratch. The British needed a stopgap. a way to turn their existing Shermans into credible tank killers before they faced the inevitable Panthers and Tigers in France. Across the Channel, German commanders were confident. They had studied Allied armor since Tunisia and Sicily, dismissing the Sherman as technically inferior. In their reports, British and American tanks were numerous but soft. The Panther, with its sloped 80 mm frontal armor and 75 mm K-42 gun, was built to dominate open fields. The Tiger, heavier and rarer, symbolized German engineering pride and psychological dominance. Each vehicle was not just a machine, but a statement that German design would always outrun Allied quantity. Yet that assumption carried danger. When an army believes its enemy cannot adapt, surprise becomes deadly. As June 1944 approached, British workshops in southern England worked day and night, converting standard Shermans into something new, something unexpected. Their goal: to give the Allies a weapon capable of standing toe-to-toe with Germany's best. The men doing the conversions were not front-line soldiers, yet their welding torches and calipers would soon change the rhythm of battle itself. In the coming months, a single variant of the Sherman would begin to appear among the green hedgerows of Normandy. Longer, barreled, awkward in silhouette, but deadly from nearly a mile away. The British called it the Sherman Firefly. The idea for the Firefly began not in a general's office, but in the cramped workshop of a British engineer. In late 1943, Major George Bridie of the Royal Armoured Corps and Warrant Officer W.G.K. Kilburn of the Royal Armament Research and Development Establishment began experimenting with a desperate solution: mounting the British 17-pounder anti-tank gun inside an American-built Sherman turret. The 17-pounder was long, heavy, and powerful. Its recoil would destroy a standard turret mount. But necessity in wartime has a way of silencing doubts. The conversion process was intricate. The massive gun had to be rotated sideways, its breech modified, and the radio moved into a box welded to the rear of the turret. A new counterweight balanced the barrel, and the ammunition, nearly twice the size of the 75-mun shell, was stored wherever it could fit. It was not elegant, but it worked. The prototype fired successfully in early 1944. The result was ungainly in appearance, yet revolutionary in effect. Production began in secret. At factories in Britain, teams converted existing Sherman Mark V some M4A Ford and Mark IC some M4 hulls, averaging about 200 Fireflies a month by spring 1944. Every available 17-pounder gun was pressed into service. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, approximately 342 Fireflies were ready for deployment, scattered among British, Canadian, and Polish armored regiments. The ratio was deliberate, usually one Firefly per 4 standard Shermans. Within each troop, it became the sniper of the formation, tasked to eliminate high-value enemy armor, while the others provided suppressing fire and maneuver. Crews often painted their barrels with disruptive stripes or mud to disguise the Firefly's longer gun, hoping German spotters wouldn't pick them out first. Meanwhile, across the front, the Wehrmacht's armored divisions were preparing to defend France. In June 1944, the Germans fielded around 500 tanks in the west, including roughly 600 Panthers, 200 Tigers, and hundreds of older Panzer IVs. Many of these were concentrated around Caen and St. Eloi, precisely where British and Canadian forces were expected to push inland. To them, Allied armor seemed inferior in every measurable way. German doctrine was built around the concept of Kampfgruppen, flexible battle groups combining armor, infantry, and anti-tank guns. They relied heavily on ambush tactics, exploiting the hedgerows and elevation lines that turned Normandy into a sniper's maze. A Panther could hide, wait for a Sherman column to pass, and destroy 2 or 3 tanks before retreating unseen. For British tankers, every field was a potential trap. The Firefly's appearance began to change that equation. Its 17-pounder APDS round could penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther at over 1,000 meters, and even a Tiger-Eye's side armor at similar range. The weapon's muzzle flash was blinding, its report deafening, but when it fired, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. German crews who once waited confidently in ambush now faced an unseen counter predator capable of striking first. Still, this change was gradual, almost invisible at first. In the first weeks after D-Day, Fireflies operated quietly among standard Shermans. They were few in number, often misidentified even by friendly infantry. But word began to spread, tank crews whispering about the long-barreled Sherman that could kill a Tiger. Reports filtered back through the German lines, too. Some Panther crews began targeting Shermans with conspicuously longer guns first, believing, correctly, that those were the real threat. What had started as an improvised engineering fix was becoming a decisive psychological shift. For the first time since 1942, British tank crews believed they had a weapon that could fight the enemy's best on equal terms. But the Firefly's true impact would not be measured in factory numbers or blueprints. It would be revealed in the hedgerows of Normandy, under smoke, mud, and fire, where its 17-pounder gun met the steel of German armor. The smoke, the terrain, and the human nerves behind every shot, these would define what came next. War is fought by machines, but it's lived by men. Inside every Sherman was a crew of 5 commander, gunner, loader, driver, and co-driver. They were young, often barely trained, and bound by shared vulnerability. The Sherman's interior was cramped and noisy, its steel walls thin enough that men could hear bullets ping against the armor like hail. When hit, fuel and ammunition ignited in seconds. A single penetrating shell could turn the tank into an inferno before anyone reached the hatch. For British and Canadian crews in Normandy, the early days of battle were a grim education. German 75 mm and 88 mm guns struck with devastating precision from unseen positions. Many tanks never fired a shot before being destroyed. Yet among the ranks, hope grew. A rumor about a new version of the Sherman with a long gun, one that could pierce even a Tiger. The first time they saw it, men stared at its stretched barrel, skeptical but curious. It looked almost absurdly long, like a spear on treads. Those who crewed the Firefly quickly learned it demanded respect. The 17-pounder's recoil shook the entire vehicle, its breech dangerously close to the loader's chest. Ammunition was heavy, the turret crowded. Every shot required coordination. A commander's calm, a gunner's steadiness, a loader's rhythm. But when that shell struck home, the crew saw the difference instantly. Where the 75mm gun left scorch marks, the 17-pounder left wreckage. Veterans described the sensation as empowerment, the feeling that at last they weren't fighting from behind. Firefly crews began to develop pride, even defiance. They would paint slogans on their barrels, give their tanks names like Velvet Glove or Achilles. Still, they knew that their advantage came at a price. The Firefly's long barrel made it easier for German gunners to spot. Commanders learned to keep Fireflies behind hedges. Using camouflage and patience, the tank was a hunter, never the first to move, always the one to finish the fight, Now, tactically, the Firefly's arrival forced subtle shifts in Allied doctrine. Before Normandy, Allied tank tactics emphasized maneuver and volume of fire over raw penetration. A typical troop of 4 Shermans would advance in formation, one tank suppressing, others flanking. But in the bocage, visibility rarely extended beyond 200 yards. German armor lurked unseen, firing from hull-down positions. The Firefly gave British commanders a way to fight back without closing suicidal distances. Now, Fireflies were positioned at the rear of the troop, overwatching lanes and crossroads. They acted as sniper tanks, using their range advantage to destroy enemy armor before it threatened the main body. Communication within troops changed too. Commanders coordinated their Fireflies' fields of fire like artillery. Infantry learned to mark enemy positions with smoke to help the long gun engage unseen targets. The tactical results were immediate. In engagements around Tilly, Sells, and Caen, Fireflies knocked out Panthers that had dominated open ground for days. Sometimes one well-placed shot reversed the flow of battle. In reports, German units noted Shermans with abnormally long barrels, firing armor, piercing rounds at great distance. That phrase would appear repeatedly in German intelligence summaries from July 1944 onward. Yet even as it gained a fearsome reputation, the Firefly remained vulnerable. Its hull and turret armor were no thicker than any other Sherman's. A single return shot from a Panther or an 88 mm gun could still destroy it instantly. The Firefly was not invincible. It was a precision weapon in a fragile shell. Survival depended not on armor, but on first sight, first shot, first kill. For British tank commanders, this demanded a new discipline. They drilled constantly in observation, scanning for movement, muzzle flashes, broken vegetation. A Firefly that fired first lived, one that hesitated became a burning hulk. This new mindset transformed entire units. Caution became courage's twin. Commanders began coordinating tanks with artillery and Typhoon fighter bombers, using combined firepower to clear ambushes before advancing. No. Technologically, the Firefly was both a marvel and a compromise. Its 17-pounder gun was among the most powerful Allied weapons of the war, yet its installation required painful adjustments. The breech crowded the turret, forcing loaders to work bent over, sweating under the recoil slide. Ammunition storage was cut from 90 rounds to barely 70, limiting sustained fire. The radio's relocation to the turret rear gave the Firefly its distinctive boxy profile, a weakness and a symbol all at once. Ballistically, though, it changed everything. At 1,000 yards, the 17-pounder's APCBC armor-piercing ballistic cap round could penetrate 140 mm of armor, enough to pierce the frontal plate of a Panther under the right conditions. Even more fearsome was the APDS armor, piercing discarding sabot round, introduced in limited numbers in 1944, capable of over 200 mile of penetration at the same range. The accuracy was imperfect, but when it hit, few tanks survived. Compared to the U.S., 76 mm gun, the 17-pounder had almost double the muzzle energy. Where American gunners relied on teamwork and flanking, Firefly crews could engage in frontal duels, rare, but sometimes unavoidable. For the first time, the Allies possessed a tank gun that outperformed most of Germany's own. Engineers knew this was not the end of tank design. It was a stopgap. The Firefly was never meant to replace the Sherman, only to balance the equation. But in doing so, it created something more powerful than numbers or steel belief. belief that the tide of armored warfare could shift not through size or weight, but through ingenuity. In the summer of 1944, belief was a weapon as potent as any gun. And belief was spreading among officers, commanders, and even the enemy. Leadership in Normandy was a constant struggle between vision and survival. For the British, commanders like Major General Percy Hobart, the man behind many of Britain's armored innovations, had long believed that technology could solve what courage alone could not. Hobart's funnies, his modified engineering tanks for D-Day, had proven that creative adaptation could change the course of a battle. The Firefly embodied that same philosophy. Take what exists and make it lethal through ingenuity. Senior officers initially resisted the conversion. They feared that altering the Sherman would delay deliveries and complicate logistics. But field commanders were relentless. Reports from Italy and North Africa had shown too many losses against German heavy armor. By early 1944, Hobart and his peers pushed the decision upward. The 17-pounder conversion was authorized, rushed, and implemented. In retrospect, it was one of the fastest technological adaptations of the entire war. Once deployed, Fireflies became the hidden aces of British armored units. Commanders planned their advances around them. In each troop, the Firefly's position was carefully chosen, slightly behind, ideally in overwatch. Orders often emphasized, do not expose the Firefly unnecessarily. Losing one meant losing the troop's best hope of survival. As a result, many engagements were choreographed around keeping the Firefly alive long enough to deliver its killing shot. The effect rippled up the chain of command. Reports from Normandy quickly reached the British 21st Army Group headquarters. Commanders like General Bernard Montgomery noted the Firefly's growing reputation. He understood its symbolic value as much as its tactical one. In a campaign where the Wehrmacht's prestige rested on its feared armor, the Firefly was proof that the Allies could not only match German engineering, they could surpass it. Got across the battlefield. German leadership was coming to similar conclusions, though from the opposite direction. Before Normandy, German officers had grown accustomed to technical superiority. Since 1941, their tanks had generally outgunned the Allies. The Panther and Tiger were sources of both military confidence and national propaganda. They were symbols of invincibility. In the words of one Panzer commander, when a Tiger entered the field, the enemy fled. But in Normandy, that illusion began to crack. After D-Day, reports reached Panzer Lehr Division and 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, that enemy Shermans were knocking out Panthers at long range, sometimes 500 meters or more. At first, these accounts were dismissed as exaggeration or lucky hits. When losses continued, skepticism turned to concern. German intelligence units investigated and quickly identified a new Sherman with extended barrel length, which they nicknamed the Langrohr Sherman, long-barreled Sherman. Orders circulated warning tank crews to prioritize destroying these tanks first in any engagement. The psychological reversal was profound. Panther crews who had once hunted Shermans with impunity now faced uncertainty. Visibility in Normandy was poor. Engagements were often ambushes fought at under 500 yards. A single unseen Firefly could destroy the lead tank of a German column before vanishing behind cover. Even elite formations began to experience caution, slowing their advances, using infantry screens to detect enemy armor. The aggressor had turned cautious. The hunted had learned to hunt. One captured German officer remarked bitterly during interrogation, "We thought all Shermans were the same. Then we learned one of them could kill anything we had. It was not just a loss of hardware, it was a loss of confidence." The Firefly's very existence forced German commanders to change behavior. They began conserving their Panthers, deploying them more defensively, aware that even a brief exposure could end in industry. Strategically and morally, this shifted code far beyond individual battles. The Firefly was not a war winner by itself, but it was a symbol of adaptive warfare, the ability to turn industrial pragmatism into battlefield advantage. It demonstrated that the Allies, long dismissed as unimaginative mass producers, could innovate under pressure. In the grand strategy of the war, this mattered deeply. The German army was trapped in a culture of perfection, obsessed with the next wonder weapon, the next technological leap. The Allies, by contrast, practiced evolution, not revolution. They took existing designs and made them deadly through practical engineering and field logic. The Firefly was that philosophy in steel form. For the soldiers, it also carried moral weight. In a war where tankers often faced certain death, the Firefly offered a measure of fairness. Crews who had watched friends burn in underpowered Shermans finally had a weapon that could strike back. Many spoke later of the psychological relief, the knowledge that if they met a Tiger, they at least had a fighting chance. That belief lifted morale, strengthened resolve, and changed how Allied tankers approached their duty. And on a human level, it blurred the myth of the invincible German tank ace. Suddenly, even the most experienced Panther commander could fall to a single British shot from half a mile away. The idea that Allied soldiers were merely the beneficiaries of numbers or luck no longer held. The Firefly became the embodiment of earned power, the proof that courage combined with intelligence could overcome fear and steel. By August 1944, this transformation in attitude was tangible across the Normandy front. German forces were still formidable, but their aura of superiority had fractured. And as both sides prepared for the brutal, armored clashes that would define the summer, one question remained. When fire met steel in the open fields around Cannonviller's bocage, would the Firefly's promise hold? By mid-June 1944, Normandy had become a battlefield of attrition. Rain turned the fields to sludge. Hedgerows, thick with roots, thorns, and mud, became fortresses. Every mile was paid for in fire and steel. Allied columns crept forward, their tank engines growling under low clouds, every bush a possible ambush. For the British Second Army advancing toward Caen, each day meant a dozen skirmishes with unseen Panthers waiting behind the next field wall. It was here, amid the choking dust and tension, that the Firefly earned its name. On June 13, 1944, near the small town of Villers Bocage, British armor of the 7th Armored Division clashed with German Tigers from Michael Wittmann's 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion. The battle became infamous. Wittmann's surprise assault destroyed over a dozen Allied vehicles in minutes, showcasing German armor's terrifying potential. But what followed in the days after went largely unnoticed in popular memory, the counteractions by British and Canadian forces using the new Firefly-equipped units. In the hedgerows west of the town, a troop from the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry lay in ambush. Their commander, Sergeant Gordon, had orders to cover an open field from which German armor was expected to advance. As dust settled, 3 Panthers of the 12th SS Panzer Division moved cautiously into range, unaware that a Firefly's barrel was already aligned. The first shot from the 17-pounder struck the lead Panther's turret at over 800 yards. Flames burst from the hatches. The second Panther tried to pivot, but was hit before its gun traversed halfway. The third reversed, retreating behind a barn. In less than a minute, the Firefly had neutralized a full Panther patrol. The engagement was later confirmed by regimental logs, one of the first documented cases where a Firefly decisively eliminated German heavy armor from ambush range. The British units, the long gun can kill them. Crews whispered. That sentence became a promise. Later that summer, during Operation Goodwood, July 18-20, 1944, the British launched their largest armored offensive of the campaign. Over 200 tanks advancing east of Caen. The Germans waited with minefields, anti-tank guns, and hidden Panthers from the 21st Panzer Division. The losses were staggering. Yet amidst the chaos, Fireflies provided the breakthrough power that kept the operation from collapsing entirely. One Canadian Firefly from the Sherbrooke Fusiliers Regiment reportedly destroyed 5 Panthers in a single engagement east of Cagney. The gunner, Trooper Joe Eakins, firing from a concealed orchard, used calm precision, 1 shot per target, each finding its mark. German crews who survived described the experience as instantaneous death from invisible range. That same Firefly, historians later confirmed, was responsible for killing famed German tank ace Michael Wittmann on August 8 during Operation Totalize. Whether Eakins' shell or another units did the final damage, the symbolic weight was enormous. Germany's most feared tank commander destroyed by the very weapon his army had once mocked. These engagements marked the Firefly's coming of age. No longer an experiment or field improvisation, it had become a decisive factor in the armored struggle for Normandy. Its success forced both sides to change tempo. British tank units now coordinated attacks with confidence that their lead Fireflies could counter German armor head-on. Infantry began requesting Firefly support when facing dug-in tanks. German commanders, once bold in open ground, began preferring wooded positions to avoid the 17-pounders. The shock went deeper than tactics. Captured German documents from July and August 1944 reveal growing anxiety about Allied tank capabilities. Reports from Panzer Group West noted, new British Sherman with long gun penetrates Panther front armor at long distance. Countermeasures must be taken immediately. Crews were instructed to camouflage their tanks more heavily and to assume that all Shermans could now destroy them. The once mocked Allied armor had become a credible threat. Every engagement carried brutal clarity. In the narrow lanes of Tilly, Sur-Sulz, tank duels often occurred at ranges under 400 yards. A Firefly's gunner had mere seconds to identify, aim, and fire before becoming a target himself. Success meant survival. Hesitation meant death. Crews learned to trust instinct over calculation. You didn't think, one veteran later recalled. You fired where you thought he'd appear and prayed the shell went first. For every victory, losses still came heavy. Fireflies burned alongside their shorter, barreled brothers. The Germans remained lethal, their 88 Numev guns capable of splitting armor cleanly in two. But each battle left the balance more even, each engagement eroding the myth that the Tiger and Panther were untouchable. By the end of July, the Normandy front was shifting. The Allies had fought their way through the hedgerows into open terrain, the kind of battlefield where range and accuracy mattered most. Here, the Firefly's long barrel became a decisive advantage. From hull-down positions, they could destroy German armor before the enemy even reached effective range. The long gun's echo rolled across the plains like thunder, a sound both terrifying and triumphant. Still, the cost was enormous. Hundreds of Allied tanks lay wrecked across Normandy. But now, for every burned Sherman, there was often a smoking Panther or Tiger beside it, proof that the balance had changed. The Firefly had done more than level the field. It had signaled a turning point. German armor was no longer the hunter. It was becoming the hunted. And as August dawned, both armies prepared for the next phase. The battles that would decide not just Normandy, but the future of armored warfare in Western Europe. By early August 1944, the Germans could no longer dismiss the Firefly. Reports from the front lines described Allied tanks with long barrels firing devastating rounds from distances once considered safe. Commanders in Panzer Lehr Division and the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, began changing their doctrine. Panther and Tiger crews were ordered to avoid exposed approaches and to rely heavily on concealment, hold down positions, and supporting infantry. The shift was immediate and tactical. German units deployed flak 8.8 guns and packed 43 anti-tank guns in overlapping fields of fire to neutralize Fireflies at distance. Ambushes became denser. Routes through open fields were meticulously mapped, and reconnaissance intensified. In essence, the Germans were forced onto the defensive. Where previously they had dictated the terms of armored engagements, they now reacted to Allied positions. During Operation Totalize, August 8 to 9, 1944, this shift was vividly apparent. British and Canadian armored divisions advanced south of Caen to break through German lines toward Falaise. Fireflies, integrated into each tank troop, took up overwatch positions on slight ridges and along hedgerows. As German Panthers attempted to counterattack, Firefly gunners struck first, destroying tanks before they could fire. A single Firefly reported destroying 3 Panthers in under 15 minutes, its rounds punching clean through frontal armor. The psychological impact was undeniable. German crews hesitated, repositioned, and frequently withdrew, unwilling to risk a frontal duel. Even when Germans adjusted, they were limited. The Panther and Tiger were powerful, but slow to redeploy. Fireflies could fire from concealed positions, relocate, and engage another target within minutes. British commanders exploited this mobility, coordinating Fireflies with artillery barrages and Typhoon fighter bombers. Each engagement became a carefully orchestrated ballad of fire and maneuver. German forces found themselves reacting to a weapon that defied previous assumptions about armor supremacy. The Firefly's effectiveness was amplified by British combined arms doctrine. Infantry spotted enemy positions, artillery pinned down strong points, and Fireflies provided precise, long-range strikes against the most dangerous armored targets. This integration allowed Sherman troops, previously vulnerable to Panther and Tiger ambushes, to maintain momentum. In the Falaise pocket, where German forces faced encirclement, Fireflies played a crucial role. Their presence prevented counterattacks from halting Allied advances and disrupted the cohesion of German formations. Units that might have formed a defensive bulwark were forced to scatter or risk annihilation. By the time the Allies closed the pocket in late August, thousands of German soldiers were captured and hundreds of their tanks were destroyed or abandoned. Fireflies were instrumental in tipping the scales, not by sheer numbers, but by neutralizing the heaviest threats that had dominated Normandy for weeks. On a tactical level, the Firefly's reputation spread beyond the battlefield. German after-action reports repeatedly mention Shermans with extended barrels, capable of engaging armor at ranges previously considered safe. Field manuals were updated to prioritize their destruction, and unit commanders were instructed to treat them as a first threat. In essence, one vehicle had altered operational planning across an entire front. Yet the Firefly's influence went beyond immediate kills. It forced a reassessment of armored warfare. German units realized that numerical superiority could no longer guarantee dominance. The Allies had proven that innovation, adaptation, and precision could counter technical advantages. The Firefly became a symbol of this shift, a psychological as well as material threat that redefined the balance of power on the battlefield. For British and Canadian tank crews, confidence soared. Where previously a Panther or Tiger might inspire dread, now there was hope. A well-placed Firefly could neutralize the threat before it became lethal. Morale improved, and units operated with a new boldness. Men who had feared open ground now maneuvered with careful aggression, knowing their Fireflies could strike first. In retrospect, the summer of 1944 revealed a profound truth. Technology and tactics were inseparable. The Firefly did not win Normandy alone, nor did it replace human courage or command. But it exemplified how adaptive engineering, combined with tactical insight, could reshape the battlefield. German armored units, once confident in their invincibility, faced a new reality. The Allies were no longer passive. They could fight the best tanks toe to toe. As August ended and the Falaise pocket closed, the Germans retreated, battered and demoralized. The Firefly had changed the narrative of armored warfare in Western Europe. What began as an experimental conversion had become a decisive tool, reshaping engagements, doctrine, and even enemy psychology. From the hedgerows of Normandy to the open fields beyond Caen, the Firefly had proven one immutable fact in war: ingenuity can strike as powerfully as steel. And with the German retreat, the stage was set for the aftermath. A battlefield littered with tanks, shattered morale, and lessons learned at immense cost. By late August 1944, the Normandy countryside was a graveyard of tanks and twisted steel. Hedge-lined lanes and bombed villages bore silent witness to weeks of brutal combat. The Sherman Firefly, though only a fraction of Allied armored strength, had left its mark. British and Canadian regiments reported destruction of dozens of Panther and Tiger tanks in direct engagements where Fireflies played a leading role. In the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, after the ambush near Villers, bocage regimental logs detailed that a single Firefly had destroyed 2 Panthers and a Tiger within minutes. Similar reports came from the Sherbrooke Fusiliers. At least 5 Panthers were confirmed destroyed east of Cagney by one Firefly troop. These were not exaggerations. Unit war diaries, post-battle assessments, and intelligence reports confirmed the numbers. German forces felt the shock in material and morale. Commanders documented the emergence of Shermans with long barrels in official after-action reports. One report from Panzer Lehr Division, dated July 24, 1944, stated, "Enemy now fields tanks capable of engaging and destroying our Panthers and Tigers at distances where we were previously safe. Tactical adaptations are necessary immediately." The effect on German armor was profound. Units that had advanced with confidence during D-Day now slowed. Ambushes became denser, routes more cautious. Panther and Tiger crews reported hesitation when facing any Sherman formation, always scanning for the distinctive long barrel of a Firefly. Even elite units like 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, adjusted their attack formations to neutralize the Firefly threat, prioritizing concealment and overwatch rather than aggressive maneuver. The Firefly's impact was not solely psychological. Its presence directly influenced battlefield outcomes. During Operation Totalize, Fireflies destroyed German armor that might otherwise have stalled the Allied advance south of Caen. The coordinated use of Fireflies with infantry and artillery helped maintain momentum despite heavy resistance. Reports from the 21st Army Group noted that, without these long-barreled Shermans, many assaults would have faced far greater casualties. Losses among Allied tanks remained significant. While Fireflies destroyed high-value targets, their own vulnerability remained. Thin armor meant a single 75 mm or 88 mm round could destroy them. Records indicate that, despite superior firepower, Fireflies were frequently knocked out or damaged in the chaos of hedgerow engagements. Yet their calculated deployment, typically one per troop, ensured that even if a Firefly fell, its impact had already been felt. On the human side, crews developed a cautious respect for the weapon they operated. Tank commanders often rehearsed positioning and observation meticulously, understanding that success depended on discipline as much as firepower. Infantry learned to signal targets and support their Fireflies, creating a synergy that extended the effectiveness of the long gun beyond the crew alone. From the German perspective, this new reality was recorded with both frustration and grudging respect. Intelligence summaries warned of British tanks capable of frontal penetration of our heaviest armor at range, and adjustments were ordered. Panther and Tiger crews were instructed to prioritize reconnaissance and camouflage and to avoid engagement in open terrain where Fireflies might lie hidden. The very tactics that had made German armor so formidable, rapid advances, bold assaults, numerical superiority, now carried risk in every encounter. Immediate consequences also appeared in captured German documents and prisoner interrogations. Tankers described the Firefly as a Sherman transformed into a predator, and noted that surprise encounters often ended in catastrophic losses. Morale within German units fluctuated, with many crews becoming increasingly cautious, hesitant to engage without reconnaissance or numerical advantage. By the end of the Normandy campaign's first phase, the Firefly had established itself as more than a technical curiosity. It had altered the tempo of battle, dictated German tactical choices, and empowered Allied crews in a way that the standard Sherman could not. The cost in steel and lives remained high, but the battlefield now favored those who could see, shoot, and survive at longer ranges, a capability that had been missing just weeks earlier. The next chapter would reveal longer-term operational consequences, how the Firefly's introduction shaped the course of the Normandy campaign, influenced Allied armored doctrine, and left a lasting mark on German planning. By September 1944, the Normandy campaign had reshaped the Western Front. Allied forces had broken through German defenses, the Falaise pocket closed, and the Wehrmacht was retreating toward the Seine and beyond. In these critical weeks, the Firefly's impact extended beyond individual engagements. Tactically, Fireflies had forced German armored units into defensive postures. Panthers and Tigers once the dominant force in open engagements, were increasingly hesitant to move without infantry support or anti-tank screens. German commanders noted that Fireflies could engage and destroy their heaviest tanks at ranges exceeding 800 meters, often before the Germans could effectively respond. This forced operational adaptation, slower advances, dispersed formations, and heavier reliance on ambush and terrain. Even elite units like the 12th SS Panzer Division acknowledged the need to avoid predictable maneuvers, reducing the speed and initiative that had historically given them an edge. On the Allied side, the Firefly's introduction validated combined arms tactics. Infantry, artillery, and air support coordinated more effectively with armored units, using Fireflies as the spearhead against high-value targets. Commanders learned to position Fireflies strategically, exploiting their long-range capabilities while minimizing exposure. The result was a more efficient, survivable armored advance, reducing casualties among standard Sherman units and infantry alike. Field reports from August and September consistently highlighted the Firefly's decisive role in neutralizing German counterattacks and maintaining the momentum of the Allied advance. The psychological impact on both sides was significant. Allied crews gained confidence knowing that enemy heavy tanks were no longer invincible. Morale improved, particularly among British tank regiments, who had previously endured devastating losses against Panther and Tiger units. Conversely, German forces experienced a steady erosion of battlefield confidence. Encounters with Fireflies made commanders cautious, slowing offensive operations and increasing vulnerability to Allied planning and reconnaissance. Reports emphasized that crews now treated any Sherman as potentially lethal, complicating German tactical decision-making. The Firefly also influenced future armor doctrine. British and Commonwealth planners recognized the value of combining high-velocity anti-tank guns with mobile armored platforms. Post-Normandy designs and upgrades increasingly prioritized firepower capable of defeating the heaviest enemy tanks, balanced with mobility and reliability. Lessons learned in Normandy informed decisions on the Centurion tank and other post-war British armor. Survivability alone was insufficient without the ability to engage and destroy enemy armor at range. Operationally, the Firefly's presence shortened engagements and reduced the effectiveness of German counterattacks. In the closing weeks of the Normandy campaign, German units often retreated rather than risk confrontation with Firefly-equipped formations. Records indicate that in several sectors, German Panzer divisions abandoned fortified positions after Firefly sightings alone, demonstrating the weapon's influence as a force multiplier. The ability to strike decisively, combined with the psychological effect on enemy commanders, amplified Allied operational flexibility. Beyond Normandy, the Firefly became a symbol of adaptive warfare. It represented the integration of innovation, engineering, and tactical necessity. Unlike tanks designed purely for weight, armor, or speed, the Firefly demonstrated that battlefield adaptation could yield disproportionate effects. It was a clear example of how practical solutions, a long gun mounted in an existing hole, could challenge assumptions of technological superiority, forcing even elite enemy units to reconsider their approach. In historical hindsight, the Firefly's impact resonates as a case study in both engineering and military psychology. It did not change the course of the war alone, but it leveled a playing field previously dominated by German heavy armor. The lessons extended beyond Normandy, shaping Allied approaches to armored combat in Northwest Europe and influencing post-war tank development philosophies worldwide. By late August 1944, as the Allies pushed through northern France, the Germans were in full retreat. Fires still burned in fields and villages, but the Firefly had already left an indelible mark. Enemy formations approached more cautiously, Allied units advanced more boldly, and armored warfare in Western Europe had been fundamentally altered. The balance of steel had shifted, if only slightly but decisively, signaling the beginning of the end for German dominance in tank combat. The stage was now set for reflection. The summer of 1944 had demonstrated that ingenuity, precision, and courage could overcome fearsome technology. And in the quiet after the battles, historians and soldiers alike would measure the Firefly's legacy in steel, smoke, and the transformed psychology of men on both sides of the fight. The Normandy fields lay silent after the thunder of battle. Twisted steel and cratered earth bore witness not only to lives lost, but to the quiet triumph of innovation under pressure. The Sherman Firefly, born from necessity and ingenuity, had proven that even a seemingly modest machine could challenge the mightiest of enemies. In a war dominated by mass and mechanical superiority, the Firefly demonstrated the enduring value of adaptation and precision. For the men inside the tanks, it was more than a weapon. It was reassurance, a measure of control in chaos. The Firefly allowed crews to face Tigers and Panthers with confidence, transforming fear into calculated resolve. The human element remained central: a well-trained gunner, a disciplined loader, and a calm commander could leverage steel and physics to bend fate on the battlefield. In these moments, technology and human courage became inseparable. Strategically, the Firefly's influence extended beyond Normandy. It forced the Germans to rethink armored tactics, slowed their offensive tempo, and shifted the psychological balance of tank warfare. Its legacy was a reminder that innovation need not be revolutionary to be decisive. Even a modification of an existing platform could change doctrine, alter outcomes, and save lives. Ultimately, the Firefly embodies a truth about warfare and human ingenuity. Victory does not always belong to the largest or heaviest force. It belongs to those who adapt, observe, and act with precision. In the orchards and hedgerows of Normandy, amid mud, smoke, and fire, this truth was writ in steel. The Germans had once laughed at Shermans. By 1944, those laughs had faded. In their place came caution, respect, and the sobering recognition that even the most fearsome weapon could be challenged if men were willing to think, to innovate, and to fire first.